Afternoon, folks. How are you? I hope you're having a great day. I was not planning on going live today, but I'm going to be making some other videos, and so I'm already in the studio, and I thought I would make a quick one here. I'm going to make something to finish up a project that has to do with these little grumblies. Lauren Enders sent me a grumbly to adapt. I don't know if you've seen these. They're obnoxious and kind of gross. And this video is not going to show you how to adapt these. But the last step in he's adapted. I can show you if you want. He's really irritating, so I don't really want to. But the last step is that I actually have the wires pulled out from this guy that if I short them together, it'll activate the toy. And I've got four different switches. Basically, they all connect to ground to activate them. Like I said, he's very irritating, but he works. And so I've got shake. We got tap the button on the front, shake left and right, shake up and down, and turn upside down, all pulled out, which is great. And, so this is great, but I need to be able to get these into a set of switches. And so the first thing I did was I looked at what other toys we have that, he'll go to sleep. So I looked at what other toys we have that have more than one switch, and the only one I could find was the My Pal Scout. So I found the box that we use for the My Pal Scout, and I thought, oh, this will work great. I'll just reuse it. The thing is, you can't really take this cute puppy dog with the hands that mean something and turn it into a switch for a grumbly. It just doesn't make any sense. So I thought it would make sense to actually design a new one that basically just has the spots for the four switches and the input. And I thought, that is simple enough that it might make a good video to kind of do some 3D modeling live. So I am going to I'm going to go ahead and do that. So hi all. If you guys want to say hi in the Facebook link, I'd love to see you. And I don't know if I'll see your comments until the end, but I'll go back and check. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to walk through how to design something that serves the same purpose as this. Do it quickly and easily. I'm going to use some neat features in Fusion, like circular patterns. That makes this nice and easy. And it should show you it's not that hard to make a box like this. I'm not going to show you how to do the pretty pattern on the top. First of all, I had to get Lori to draw me that because I couldn't draw it. And even if you had it, it's kind of maybe a step for another day to get an SVG imported and looking pretty. We'll just worry about getting this with a normal box on top and no head. So let's take a look at that real quick. This is kind of what we want to end up with when we're done. We want to end up with a box that's got 1, 2, 3, 4 spots for switches. It's also got a line for the input. You'll see that one has a cutout, which we can talk through why later, but it makes it easier to wire the jacks first, and then you can slide this in and shove them through. Whereas if the last one has a full hole here, you basically got to do all the wiring while this box is attached, which kind of sucks. So a little slot there's a good idea, but this is kind of what I want to get to. I want to start from absolutely nothing and get to a box that looks kind of like this. I will, let me turn off the origin. I can kind of show you what it looks like rendered. It would look about like this. And it should give you a good idea of what we're aiming for. Everything will get really slow while it renders for a second, but this is the idea. Let me stop that. It's just going to throw off all of the encoding if I do that, so we won't bother making it look pretty. But this is the box that we're going to try and make. Okay? So let's start from scratch. We'll create a new file, a new design I'm in Fusion 360. If you don't know what that is, this might not be the video for you. But this is the design software that we use to make most of our parts. It looks like it may have had a hard time keeping up. I am going to make the assumption that I am still streaming and that this eventually caught up and that you are fine as long as I don't do any more rendering, which I will not do. And let's go ahead and get started on how to make this thing in Fusion. So when you start up in Fusion, it's very intimidating. You have a big white screen and nothing to see. Almost always, there's a couple things that I do. I always turn on the origin so that I can see where the center of my world is. I usually leave it on all the time, but it kind of shows you where the center of X, Y, and Z is here in the middle. And then the other thing I always end up doing is starting with an initial sketch. So when you're trying to make a 3D object, you still have to start with a 2D drawing in the beginning and someplace to start. And so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and create a sketch. That's right here, create sketch. And it's going to ask us for what plane we want to create it. We're going to use the one that's sitting on the ground right here. And now I'm actually drawing onto a 2D surface, and I'm just going to draw some shapes. I will show you, before I started, I did a little bit of measuring. I'll redo it here so you guys can see. I took a look with my calipers at these squares, these cubes right here. So this is basically how much room do we need to hold one switch, right? So it kind of came out 18 by 18 by 18. That cube kind of works well. And so we're going to make the assumption that these switches will fit well in a 18 by 18 by 18 millimeter cube, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a rectangle, a center rectangle. That is, and it doesn't really matter where I make it, it's going to be 18 by 18. Okay? So I made a square there, a rectangle there that is 18 by 18. I hit enter, and now I have a square. I can move this kind of wherever I want. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make one rule on it, which is that I always want it to be directly above my origin right here. Okay? So this is going to be one of the inputs, or one of the jacks will go in this box, or the incoming wire will go here. But in order to set the rule that says this box should always be directly above this one, I'm going to use what's called a constraint. They're right here, and there's lots of different kinds of constraints. But in our case, we want the one that says horizontal vertical. What that means is that if I click this point and I click this point right here, they will always stay directly above each other. So now I can still move this. I can move this point, but I can't move it left and right. I can only move it up and down. Okay? So now I've got my square that represents one of my switches. It is always locked directly above my center point, and I can move this thing around as I want to. One interesting thing to note here is the colors of the lines. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see this a little better. You'll see that the top and bottom lines here are blue, and the left and right here are black. So when a line is black in Fusion, it means that it can't be changed. So the distance here can't be moved left and right, but the distance here can be moved up and down. And so when you see something that is black, it won't move. When you see something that is blue, it can be moved. Okay? So hopefully that works. Hi, Andy. How are you? I see somebody. Happy Friday. It is Friday. That's right. So so here I'm going to go ahead and make my square that's going to represent one of my spots for a switch. And then the next question is going to be, well, how many switches do I want it to hold? Well, if you look at the overhead here, you'll see that this one actually holds 4. So it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's also got a slot for the incoming. So in our case, we have the same thing, right? So we're going to want to have basically 5 squares worth of space here. So we're going to do something very powerful here called the circular pattern. And so in Fusion, you can absolutely do this by going down and saying create circular pattern. But you'll find that the S key is this shortcut key. So if I type S, and then I just start typing circular, it will show me all the things that are circular patterns, are circular. So you can duplicate things in a circular way. You can make an internal circular pattern. In our case, these are the two that we're really going to care about, okay? The top one, you may not be able to see this, but it looks like a 2D pattern of squares. And this looks like a 3D pattern of squares. So when you're in sketch mode, you're working with 2D, and this is the one that we want. So I'm going to say circular pattern. And it's going to ask me some questions. So what objects do you want to make a pattern of? And so here I'm just going to collect all of these points up here. If I didn't want to do it that way, I could just highlight this like that. That works too. I could also just double click here and it'll outline that. So we'll do that. We'll just make the outline like that. So those are the items that we want to make a pattern of. It asks me for the center point. So this is going to be my center point, will be my origin. And you'll see it just created two more down here. You'll see that the number here says 3. I can actually make this 4, 5, 6, 7, however many I want. It doesn't care how many you make. You'll eventually run out of space. But in our case, let's go ahead and make it 5. So it's got my 5 squares that I'm going to work with. Okay, and you'll see that I can still move this up and down. And if I do, it keeps that shape. It keeps all of them move in and out because it is just a pattern. Okay, so I can move them in, they'll overlap. That will not give me enough spaces between all of my switches, but I can do that. In our case, we'll kind of move it right out to around the points where they would intersect. This makes a nice size for us. So this is a great first step. I kind of have the basics of my shape here, but it's not going to make a solid, right? If I extruded these, it would make 5 separate squares, and I want it to make one shape for me. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a circle. Now, this doesn't have to be a circle. There's lots of other ways you can do this, but I'm going to go ahead and add a circle about that big. Okay? This is all about give me the shape that I want. If I wanted to, another option here, I could take a set of lines and I could like draw between all these lines, and I could make it kind of a polygon. But we'll go ahead and go ahead and do the circle one. I like the way that looks, and it kind of works. Again, I could go all the way out to the edges, except I want a flat face for each of the switches to attach to. So we'll kind of go out to about halfway out, maybe about here. And that kind of makes the shape that I want. Now, there's way too many lines here. And one option would be to trim these. There's a tool called Trim that would let you trim these. I'm not going to bother, and I'll kind of show you why. But let me go ahead and finish this sketch. And you'll see that I've left the sketch mode, and now I'm back in the 3D space. I'm no longer drawing in 2D, but this is here. So kind of the next thing I need to do is I need to extrude this up 18 millimeters to get the full cube effect. So I'm going to hit the E button for extrude. And then I'm going to have to go through and click on every one of these shapes. And it's kind of a pain. I know. It's not that bad. And then I'm going to drag this up, and I'm actually going to type in 18 millimeters. Okay? When I hit enter, it creates that solid, and that kind of is the shape of the box that I want to make. You can still see that the sketch is on the bottom down there. And in fact, it's kind of neat. Fusion will always let you modify a sketch after the fact. So for example, if I went in here, even without going in and opening up the sketch, you'll see that this point right here is still the center of that box. And I can actually drag this out, right? So if I click on this and then move it out, you'll see it actually will recalculate everything for us, right? So when you get in too far, it will complain and say, oh, I can't make that circle anymore. But if you go, you can take this out all the way out to there, and it will go ahead and do that. So you can make some adjustments after the fact if you'd like to. I'm kind of okay with it just like this. You'll see the first thing I do is I created this solid, and you're like, well, but it's not hollow. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But we kind of want to make some adjustments here to this. Let's go ahead and turn off the bottom sketches so you can see it better. We'll turn off the origin as well. So this is kind of what we wanted to get to. Before we start cutting any holes or hollowing it out, I just want to smooth it a little bit, okay? One of the things you'll see people, especially people like me who like things to look good and take time on it, you'll see everything looks smooth in their 3D printed models. And so this is a good time to do the smoothing. If you wait till later, it gets really kind of hairy. So the way you do smoothing in Fusion is usually with something called fillets. There's a feature a button right here which will show you kind of how fillets work. If you click on fillet and then click on an edge, you can basically round the edge, right? And what's nice is you can actually go through and you can do multiple edges at a time. So you can basically go through and say, okay, I want to do all the edges like this, okay? And it will round all of the edges. You can also do things like instead of these outside edges, you could do the inside. All right, so you can do fillet and choose these two and pull it out like this, right? So you can make that, rather than having these sharp corners, you can have these nice curved ones. You can also do both. So in addition to these inside corners, you can do these outside corners, and it will kind of round itself around. And you can choose how much or how little rounding you want, okay? So I just want to get rid of the sharp edges, so these kind of look okay to me. But I want to do it to all of them. So once you've started making a fillet, right, you can always go back. If you hit the control button while the fillet screen is up, if you hit the control key and just start clicking more edges, right, you can just add edges and it'll round them all. So we'll go through real quick and kind of round all these edges right here, and these inside ones. And as you might suggest, this is not necessarily necessary. It just looks good. And you do want to make sure you don't miss any, because nothing looks worse than having one corner that's not rounded. Okay, so this is all nice and rounded now. We've got all these nice rounded corners, and this is kind of the shape that we want. What's really neat about Fusion is that if I turn the sketches back on, right, I can still grab this point and move this out, and it will recalculate everything, including all the rounded corners, okay? And it will tell you when it can't. It'll give you a warning and say, you know, fillet failed or something like that. But this is kind of a really good starting point for us to make the box, okay? So let me see if I have any questions. I see Chris Young is here. Gary Wilson's here. How are you, gentlemen? I think both of you probably know a lot of this stuff. Doesn't matter. I'll keep talking anyways. Good to see you. All right, so the next step here would be to shell this out. We want to make this hollow so that it can hold the switches. And to do that, you use a modify command called shell. It's right here. Hit shell. And you click on the surface that you want to hollow out, or what do you want to carve down. And it asks you for a width, the thickness that you want to leave in the wall. My only advice to you is use a multiple of the size of the nozzle of your 3D printer. So mine is 0.4. I will make this 0.12, which would be three widths. I could do, I don't know, 0.16. That would be 4 widths. That's probably better. Don't do something that won't divide evenly, or you'll end up with a little gap. So when I hit enter, this will actually go around and carve out the box that we want. And we'll see that the right here on the top, there's this very thin wall that it just created right here. We probably could make that a little bit thicker, given what we're trying to do with it. So one neat thing about Fusion is you can always modify things in the past. So you can always go down here in your history, and you'll see that this is the sketch we originally drew. This is the extrusion where we popped it up. This is the fillet where we rounded things, and here is the shell. If I double click on the shell, it will let me change that number. We'll make it 0.2, just to make it a little bit thicker, and it'll actually make that, why 0.2? 2. I don't know why I'm doing 0.2. 2 millimeters. That's why it looks, all right, so 1.6 is fine. Sorry. So nobody catches that? Nobody helps me out? So we'll do 1.6, which is a good width, okay? I knew that looked way too thin. So here I've got basically the shape I want to make. We're going to use the circular patterns one more time. And that is we're going to carve the circles that we want. And then we're going to replicate the carving. So I went ahead and took a look at my switches. And I did a couple more measurements here. I'm not sure how well you can see this. All right. So I basically measured what size hole we would need right here, and really a good width that will catch or let this pass through easily, but easily catch the washer would be about 7 millimeters. So I want to put a 7 millimeter hole in the center of all of the points going around. And the only tip I'll give you here is that look at your origin, and one of the walls should align with one of the axes because of the way we did it. It's also going to be the one that has the original sketch we drew. This is the one that you want to draw your holes on. It just makes it much easier when you go to try and do the rotation and stuff. So we're going to go on to this side right here, and we're going to go ahead and let's look at this. Okay, we're going to put a 7 millimeter hole right in the middle of this guy. So to do that, we're going to start a new sketch. Okay, and we're going to start with 2 lines that go from corner to corner and corner to corner. And that's just so that we know where the center of our circle needs to be. While we're here, we're going to actually make these lines construction lines. What that does is it means that even though we can use them to find the center and stuff, they're not going to be used for carving. They're not going to be used for extrusions. They're just going to be used for finding the center of stuff. I'm now going to create a circle. And we're going to place it right here at the center. And we're going to make it 7 millimeters. Okay. So I now have a 7 millimeter circle drawn on that. And all I've got to do is cut it. So I'm going to extrude this in. And that's fine. I'm going to click on this back wall. It's very tempting here to say to object, but don't do that. Just do this based on distance. Okay. You'll see it automatically said negative 1.6, which is going to cut it straight in there. And so now we've got the hole we want, which is I just need 5. I need 4 more of these, right? These holes. So all I need to do is to replicate that around. So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the sketch, but we're going to do it in the 3D world. So we're going to type S and then circular pattern. You'll see that when you're not in a sketch, you have only the 3D option is here. So we're going to make a circular pattern. And we have a couple options. You can pattern faces, bodies, features, or components. In our case, we have 2 options that would work. Faces would work, but much better for us is features. So what features are these things on the bottom. Okay, so all of these extrusions and fillets and things are things that you can repeat or name and things like that, and they're called features. So I have a comment or question. Yes. So yes, Chris, you did find my error. It took forever for Facebook to show me the text. So thank you for pointing it out. We want to actually repeat this hole carving 5 times around the every spot that we want to put it. So the objects we want to do are this cutting, but it's really down here. It's this extrusion. So we click here, and it's now going to take this feature, and it's going to rotate it around this axis, okay? And we want it done 5 times. Now you'll notice everything's lining up, which is kind of cool, right? This compute option, just leave it on adjust unless you really know what you want to do. This is what it does when things don't line up perfectly. In our case, they will, but just leave it on adjust. It's the right answer. I'm going to hit OK, and you'll see it will actually carve out all of those holes for me. And this is kind of this is where we were trying to get to, right? There's only a couple things left to do. The first, I said we wanted one of these to be carved out, right? If you remember here, this has one of them carved out. And the reason for that is that you want to be able to wire these up first, and then you pop in your 4 jacks, slide in the wire, and pop the top on. So you want to be able to do it in that order. This needs to be a slot and not a hole. Easily done. We go to the same one that we've been working on the whole time. And right above it, right here, we're actually going to go in and we're going to create a sketch. Right, we're on the right one. So we're going to go in, we're going to take this one, and we're going to project this hole up. You can eyeball this if you want and just kind of guess where these lines should be, but it's much easier to hit P, which is project, and then select this hole. And you'll see what it just added. It added those purple lines there, here and there. And so now if I draw lines from here to here and here to here, I've now got a square that I can cut with. So we're going to hit extrude, bring this down, and we could just eyeball it here as well. But in this case, we'll hit 2 object, click here, and I've got my nice slot. If I want to make these not quite so sharp, I can do that by adding fillets here and there, like this, okay? Completely optional, not important that that works. All right, so this kind of makes the box that we were talking about. Let me turn off all the sketches. And, I mean, I could make it green. I could turn off the origin if you want. But this is kind of what we had talked about. And I think it kind of answers the point. Let me ask real quickly, does anybody want me to go through the process of making the top? I can. It's not that hard. Or I can make that for another day. It's already been probably long enough. The top, if you look up Noah and Pedro's videos on how to make a snap fit top, that's all I'm going to do here. Is I'm going to make a snap fit top that goes on top of it. Maybe I will capture some things on when I do that and share it, but I probably won't. I think this is probably long enough. We've been going for a while here, and let me see how long. I don't know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, way too long. So I think that's probably good enough for now. I hope this shows that making things with Fusion is not that hard. If you're looking, I mean, the next step, one thing I should show you is how to turn this into something 3D printed. So let's very quickly, I've got this in Fusion. I need to now print it. I would go in here to Tools. Under Make, you'll see there's 3D Print. Click on the object that I want to create, hit OK, and it will drop it into a slicer that I use called Simplify 3D. And let me get rid of this one that's already on there. So that's what it will look like when it's printed. And when I hit Prepare to Print, it will actually slice this and show me exactly what it's going to look like as it prints. I copy that file, walk it over to my printer, and I'm good. You'll see it does have some small support structures in here that go inside to hold the circle up. Probably not needed, but you know, it never really hurts. They pop right out, and it makes your circles nicer and neater. And I think this kind of works. You'll see I've got exactly 4 extrusions. Right? So 0.4 times 4 is 1.6, which is what we were going for before I did my math wrong. And so this will print out quickly. It'll take 40 minutes to print that out, and I would have a 3D printed object. So those are kind of the steps necessary to do this. I don't see any questions in the comments, so I will probably let this go. I appreciate your time this afternoon. I hope it helps, and I'll watch for comments later. Bye.